Hello and welcome to each and every
Llegado
one
a la
of you.
mitad de las clases
We
de
have
nuestra
reached the
escuela de
halfway
visión
point.
y estamos muy contentos y agradecidos a
And
cada
we are so
uno
happy
por
and
acompañarnos
grateful for
y
each
mucho
one
más
of you
a
who
nuestro
have
Dios
joined us.
por guiarnos hasta
And
aquí.
even more so,
Mi nombre
we're
es
grateful to
Carolina
God
del
for
Ciprete
joining us
y
up
es un
today.
placer estar con
Finally, it's
ustedes.
time to pray.
Vamos a comenzar la clase de hoy pidiendo la bendición de
With
Dios
this in mind, let us
con nuestra
begin our class
misionera
today
Paula Benítez,
asking
que
for
está
God's
sirviendo
blessing
en
with
Italia.
a missionary named Paula Benitez who is studying in Italy. All right, I invite you to bow your heads to pray. Dear Father in heaven, we are grateful for this time we have where we can spend time with the School of Mission, and we ask for your presence, dear Lord, and that you prepare our hearts to share your message to others. We thank you for the daily blessings that you have given. In your holy name, Amen. Thank you so much, Paula, for leading us in prayer. Today's class will be about how to overcome stereotypes, something that is most important in removing hurdles which can come in the way of fulfilling the mission. But before we go on to our special guest for today, we now break for our weekly announcement. Listen carefully. Remember that every Friday there is a new quiz. Don't forget to complete them after each of our classes so that you can obtain certification at the end of this series. Today's quiz is on chapters 13 and 14 from our book, Passport to Mission, as well as all of what we will hear in today's class. If you have problem with your login credentials when trying to use our page and take the quizzes, don't hesitate to write to us at the email address you see on screen. And if you haven't signed up yet, here's the link on screen where you may still do so. Don't wait any longer. Keep in mind that we are already halfway through our course. And finally, we encourage you to subscribe to our channel and activate notifications to stay up to date. And now, let us hear from our president Horacio Rizo, who comes to us along with Dr. Lenin Guaman, president of the Instituto Superior in Ecuador. We're here with another presentation from the School of Mission working for I Will Go, which is a program with a global audience, working with the church to advance and finish the work, working along, of course, our centers of learning. And as we do each Friday, before our central talk, and before the sharing of different testimonies, we would like to have a space and some time where we can get to know one of our leaders, a fellow colleague of mine, who leads an Adventist Center of Education somewhere in the world and is in charge of promoting and bringing together a preparation for professionals as well as missionary service. This Friday we have with us someone special from the ISAE, which is the Instituto Superior Adventista del Ecuador, a country which quite literally lies in the middle of the world, at the equator. Dr. and Pastor Lenny Guaman, welcome and thank you for joining with us today. Thank you, Pastor, for the invitation. It is quite truly a pleasure to be with such a multitude of young people, with this army that prepares itself for mission. What a beautiful country, Lenny, that you have. You know, I was visiting your country sometime back in February, early March, just before the pandemic closed all of our country's borders. it was just barely that I made it back to my university and didn't actually become a literal colleague of yours, getting stuck inside the country. We had the chance to visit Galapagos and the creation center that you have on the island, and what a beautiful place with such lovely people and culture that it was. We really had a splendid time. And I'm sure at your institution we may find a rich human and cultural concentration of all this that we find in your country. You're absolutely right, Pastor. We at the ISAI, just like all our sister institutions in the world, have a mission to prepare young people to complete the mission we have in front of us. And I'm proud to say that we have quite a few students, graduates of our institute, who right now working as missionaries in our own Ecuador as well as outside our country. We have a sizable group of our students who are working in Chile. So, Dr. Lenny, before you stated your role on the ISAI, you mentioned off camera that you were in charge of our volunteer service in some of the regions in Ecuador. Are we correct? Exactly. This actually helped me learn on a deeper level. I was able to talk and learn from Dr. Okum, who was the director here in the South America and later on at the GC. And we were able to promote the Adventist Volunteer Service, which is an organization within the church created so that our young people can go to a different country and learn from and about their culture and serve the people with the talents that God has given them. It is amazing to know that there are so many young people serving God with us all over. And while I had the privilege of serving in Guayaquil, in the southern part of our country, we were able to send and receive young people to serve as missionaries. Dr. L, could you share with us what the major challenges are that your institute faces in these pandemic times? What is the things that are most heavy on your heart right now? Well, we have mostly adapted to the current situation facing us, and I'm sure it has not been easy to adapt to this new reality, having to move everything to virtual. This is something that I'm sure all of our institutes all over the world have had to deal with right now, and the situation has been quite challenging, as you can imagine, because all of our teachers are well prepared to give physical and in-person classes, but now we are having to adapt ourselves into this new era, this digital age, and now we have set up all of our classes online here at this institute. Very well. Right now we have many young people listening to us. I'm sure quite a few people, more than 2,500 young people participating in our School of Mission every Friday. They take their quizzes and they're preparing themselves to serve someplace in the world. Well, right now I would like to hear a few words from you to these young people, something that you may have in your heart and that you, Pastor Lenny, personally could share to enrich them. Sure, you know, the experiences I had working with these young people and these young men and women at Adventist Volunteer Services taught me that whoever goes to a new place, a new town or city or even country, receives something that not even a university education can give them really. One can get a professional formation in classes, but for service, one needs to leave the comfort of their own homes, their birthplace and country, and go to a new place, maybe actually in their own country, but maybe preferably, I think, better outside the country. The experience they receive will create a connection in that young person to service that they will never be the same from. We can see that whoever returns from these missionary assignments never comes back the same person. Lenny, thank you so much for your time. May God richly bless you in everything you face, personal challenges, your family, the Institute, ISAI. We consider each institute to be our own. You are one of us, and we hope you feel the same way about the WAP. And in this way, in collective brotherhood, we can very soon fulfill the mission in front of us. May God bless you. And now we come back to continue with our program. Thank you so much. We are having some technical problems, but we are finding a solution as the best way we can because we're so excited to have you with us. Now is the time for the announcements. So please keep in mind that every Friday we will have a new test open for you to do, like mentioned earlier in chapter 13 and 14 from the book that we all know, Passport to Mission. So please prepare yourselves with chapters 13 and 14. And also, please remember, today's class will also be in the exam that we are going to have, in the quiz. Also, if you have any problems on entering your login credentials on our page, please don't hesitate to write to the email address that we have on our screen. And if you haven't signed up yet, please remember to sign up. There is still time, but please keep in mind that we're already halfway through our course. All right? But there's still time, so please, if you haven't signed up yet, sign up. And also, of course, we encourage you to subscribe to our page and to activate the bell notifications. And if you haven't seen our earlier videos, go ahead and watch them too. Alright, let's see if we have fixed our technical problems. Seems like we haven't. We're gonna take a short break, but please stay right where you are because we will be back very soon. ¿Se me sigue escuchando? We're back with you now. And now it's time to see Maijo. Hello, Maijo, are you there? I am here, are you? Can I hear you? Alright, we're still having some problems, but we're still finding a solution if we can. It's truly a pleasure to have you with us, Maijo. Again at the WAP, as we know you were here before. We're also super anxious and excited to hear about the subject that you're going to share with us today. And we keep waiting for what can happen. And so, hey, how is your family doing? You were here with us a few months ago. And how's your family? So okay, yeah, we're so excited actually to be with you as well. This is Friday here, and we're preparing for Sabbath with my family, and we're super glad to be here with you, being having this opportunity to serve and to talk about Jesus, and to hope that we can see Jesus' second coming soon, and to be ready for this time, that we're living in today in these pandemic time. So, if you have any questions, you can ask me because obviously we're having some technical issues. So, can you share with us, please, what activities are you doing in Spain? What are the jobs you have there? Okay, so what I do here in Spain is I'm heading the departments of teacher. I'm heading the departments of three departments actually, of teaching, of young people and families, as well as the Sabbath school. And um, that's my role here.
Genial. ¿Y pero de qué se trata esa área de ese departamento?
So could you tell us a little bit more about those departments? Yeah, so here in Europe, the older population is quite older. It's not that they're young, so because of this, there's actually an area, a department dedicated to this group of people, of older people. So I am actually working in this group as well as with teens and their families, and the Sabbath school department. And yes, like all family departments with family projects, um, we're actually creating a new project that's called Adopt a Grandfather or Grandparent. And obviously, this is a person that maybe doesn't have close family or people who they come in close contact with. And so we try to help them, putting them in contact with someone who can be a blessing to them. And but especially in these times, we might find ourselves disconnected. We might find ourselves without close connections, and obviously it's quite hard to reach everyone. So this project, what we try to do with this project is try to reach everyone that we can and be a blessing in this way.
¿Y cómo se encuentra la situación en San Gonto?
So could you tell us a little bit more about the situation in Sagunto Adventist University in Spain? Well, here we have a lot of hope. There's so many projects that we have and we want to do, and we have so much hope, that the things don't get any worse than they already are economically. But we have a dream. We have illusions that these things could get better. If you look outside, you see people walking outside, going to their jobs, walking around the campus, even on the high school, because there's more people in the high school here and in the School of Music. Slowly, we're starting to open some of these departments, and you see some movement. And it's really something that gives joy to us to see these people again slowly coming back, going on with their lives, and we're gonna see what we can do. Let's see if we can avoid a second wave. There's winter coming here in Europe, and actually today at 10 o'clock, we closed the town of Madrid. There were certain shops and places that had to be closed. The situation isn't good in any way in any place, and Spain is one of the countries that has been most affected in Europe. But we still have hope. We still continue trying to fulfill the work that we have in front of us, and still waiting for the second coming of Jesus. But yes, like I said, we have hope, and we keep working on to try and further the cause.
Gracias por esta invitación a hacer. Creo que ya salía la clase, ¿verdad?
I think that was the recording of the class, right? If you want, we can go ahead to that.
Bueno, sí, antes de mientras están
Okay,
preparando
but
algunos,
before that,
bueno,
while we're
sí,
trying
ahora
to
sí, ¿verdad?
finish
Me
fixing.
confirmó que
Okay, now they've confirmed with us that we're good to go now. So let us continue on.
Muy buenas noches.
Good evening. Thank you so much for inviting me to be part of these classes. And really, it's a privilege to join you this evening. I have always dreamed of mission and of being a missionary right now. And right now, I'm serving in Spain. So, when I was asked to present on this subject, this really got me excited to share with you. So, again, I'd like to thank the organizers for this invitation. The subject on which I was asked to present today, overcoming stereotypes, basically, that's what I was told. And truthfully, when I was asked to present, there were two questions that immediately came to my mind. The first, why me? And the second, how could this be useful to you, students at the School of Mission? How could this be useful to overcome stereotypes? Well, to the first question, the answer is easy. I'm currently head of my department here at the Union in Europe, but I'm South American. I'm not head of just one, but three departments. I'm not a theologian, rather I'm a psychologist. And if we go back to the time of my grandmother, there would have been quite a different criteria which wouldn't have allowed me to be in this position. I'm a woman, and if we go back to my mother's times, not even that long ago, I wouldn't have been chosen to be where I am. There was maybe a different standard that would have held me back. Also, I'm married to a pastor, but I have my own job, my own life. I'm allowed to think, have my own opinion, lead out, but even now I could sustain that total equality isn't found yet here on earth. And I must put in an extra dose of my time in my household and family. But you know what? I believe that I represent several stereotypes that I may be breaking. So I do hope sincerely that I can share something of worth to you in this sense. As to the second question, why would this be useful to you, the students in the School of Mission, to break stereotypes? I hope sincerely that I am able to share with you about this throughout this exposition. We could start by breaking stereotypes about the actual word stereotype, and also mention that personally, I wouldn't call this talk to be about overcoming stereotypes because that isn't actually possible. Instead, what we could do is to reorganize and better understand our stereotypes. That's going to be my challenge for you. Let's dive in. Let's see if we're all on the same page here. What is a stereotype to begin with? I like a definition that maintains that they are simplifications, oversimplifications of reality, tools that we use to better understand what we observe. Currently, in psychology, we use the analogy of the computer to understand the processes that go on in our minds. And in this way, we could say that stereotypes are the folders in which we place our types of content. And on those folders, we can add names to, maybe add even certain images to help us refer to this content in a quick and effective automatic way. This certainly can help keep our brains in optimal function, but at the same time, it can present its own risks. Do you truly believe that we are completely independent when it comes to organizing and putting together these folders? Or are we in any way influenced? Do you organize them the way you've seen at home? Do you organize them the way you've seen on Mary Kendo? I'm joking here. But were you born knowing how to organize your files, or do you believe that how you organize your house, you'll probably have your folders organized in the same way? In social psychology, we use various arguments to affirm that means of massive social communication, such as mass media and social networks, are one of the largest educators as to how we organize our folders. In fact, they're the ones who choose what each image and action means. For example, a person who is attractive, someone who is well dressed, or someone who is successful. You know, we have images that quickly come to mind that fit the folder, that describe what we think about when we think about these kinds of people. These images of reference now control what type of people would fit into these folders and those who wouldn't. And obviously, most of these images that we may consciously or unconsciously choose tend to include some kind of implicit ideology or belief behind them. But let me ask you, is this really bad? Can we organize our folders without being influenced at all? In other words, Is it possible for us to think perfectly without making these simplifications? If, then, our reality is shaped by these images we put on our folders, or the representations, then we should keep closely in mind how we process the images that go on the covers of each folder. If we truly recognize our social surroundings and media as the means by which we choose and organize our folders, we should keep in mind that the media we participate in presents us with many of these stereotypes. These stereotypes, these oversimplifications of reality, cover a broad range of people and help us not to think too much. We simply let these folders and images covering them to dictate our lives and decisions. The more we're entertained, the less we think, the easier we're manipulated. But here I find myself against the first great stereotype. It's about circular logic. If we take this argument as truth, exactly as it's explained by social psychology, we find that every system, maybe due to its own flow of information, maybe due to its own ideals, who knows, maybe even by divine decree, every system tends to favor us simplifying or oversimplifying the information that comes to our brains in order to make our brains have less thinking, to process faster. Maybe it's not only systems and computers, maybe we're actually designed to function like this. Maybe this is something that we could use to our favor. The truth is that even us, SDA Christians, organize our realities into these folders. In other words, we are also creators of stereotypes. What is good and what is bad. What is successful and what isn't. Who is saved and who is lost. The pastor, maybe. And anything but pastor. A wife of a pastor. And someone who could never fill the role. We have boxes for true professions and callings, and then there's obviously wrong types of work. We need to understand that the most direct consequences of having stereotypes is that they blind us to all aspects not fitting into the image they create. And as a consequence, these aspects can become stigmatized. In other words, they're seen as abnormal. So if the only representation of good people is a certain way, what happens when we come across someone like this? It's easy when we see them to think maybe that they have bad thoughts, errant ways of thinking, maybe with nebulous intentions, unable to pray, and nothing good to show for themselves, and therefore only worth converting and making into our ideal, just like us. Or at least like the image that we have in representation of what is good and perfect. In reality, the danger is even more than this. It can be so hard to escape from stereotypes because we ourselves can internalize them to the point that our self-worth is a function of this image, this oversimplified image that might maybe deep down actually represent us. But this way, there is so much more that we are willing to do, lengths we are willing to go to, that to leave ourselves behind in the pursuit of looking like we fit in, because we do not want to be left behind. The thing is, it kills us to be left out, even applying it to a more spiritual context, to be left out of eternity. The terrible thing about not being conscious about this is that we fall into the psychology of fear. This is the psychology that pushes the world along, and what it does at its core is it dominates. When we feel fear, or we act out of fear, we become perplexed, insecure, completely manipulatable. We lose control of our hearts and minds, something that if we are on the right side can be a relief because we're being controlled by another. We can think that salvation is a guarantee, but so easily we can fall out of this perfect image, we can fall out of this representation and just like that lose control in every sense. If only you see that the images that truly need reorganizing are in our own ranks. This will allow us to begin to become capacitated to go and do mission, in my point of view. And I believe that this can take us from trying to impose truth to respect of and for truth. And finally, maybe, hopefully, go to a truth that is shared by more than just yourself. For example, to understand that this agape love that so many times appears to be a unique Adventist possession, God actually has for all of the people on this planet that love, including for those who could never fit into the representations of our own oversimplifications. If we realize the need to receive wisdom in the organizing of your folders, in other words, of our thoughts, we can then be transformed into representations of the truth that Christ shared in his time here on earth, something that could well be a stereotype to others in the world. It could nonetheless be a liberating stereotype, one that empathizes completely with all of whom come in contact with it, and bless those by simply feeling represented by them. The question I'd like to leave you with, or questions I'd like to bring to you, is what type of Christian do you want to represent? Those who would stand by a limited and close-minded image, those who would represent, or those who would represent, a model full of life and diversity, which upon closer examination might even look like a folder labeled creation. So I'd like to show you here, this is an exhibition, an art exhibition, that has been shown all over the world. It's called The Little Black Dress. And obviously they use just one dress of the same size that is taken all over the world and tried on by women of different sizes, colors, and types. The question asked by the artist is, could all of us try on this same dress and respect that it looks different on all of us? If not, then maybe this dress isn't meant for us. When I saw this, I obviously couldn't but help think of our own Christian garments. Could it be that there could be some level of diversity in the expression of our Christianity, in our relationship with God? Even if it's within the only people that seem to possess the truth, maybe not. But I ask this question in all seriousness, could it be possible? Our society and all of humanity has changed. Why not offer something that responds to all our needs? We should call for the leaders of our church to be professional and conscious in their work. Conscious not only in the sense of feeling, acting, or thinking with this in mind, but also in the receiving of the Spirit. Those who only try to peddle or sell the truth will become obsolete and alone. Our religion must serve a purpose of bringing us together and understanding each other's need, not to insulate and create walls between us. We need to have representations of our faith that, when seen from afar, bring joy and happiness to all who come across this image. We need representations of ourselves that provoke our desire to speak and to reach out to those who are different, not like us, because we are certain that we know how to respect those differences. We need representations of our beliefs that stimulate our imagination with new perspectives. We need representations that set us free, but not as necessarily a religious body, but rather as members of humanity. I'm not naive. I know this isn't easy in any way, but I know that the only way I can make this work is by calibrating my perspective with that of the Christ, who is the desire of ages, allowing my stereotypes to be his own stereotypes. I'll see you in a moment in our section for questions. I hope to join you in the process of reaching our answers. Thank you, Maijo, for that thought-provoking class. Now let us move on to the space for questions sent to us by some of our viewers. All right. The first question we have says, we see stereotypes, for example in the story of Elijah, where the king recognized him solely by the clothes he was wearing, and even in the case of John the Baptist. So the question is, shouldn't we as a people have a similar kind of stereotype, something that identifies us as different? Well, that's a quite delicate question, yeah? It's at least the way I see it. Maybe an example that I could give you, maybe for the times we live in, even back then, you can see people who, a priest, for example, you can easily identify him. A Mormon, you can identify them as well by the way they dress. A Jehovah's Witness, they have their own customs, their own ways of acting. But we as a people, as a church, we have been liberated by this unification, by this homogenizing of who we are. We're still diverse. We're not obligated to dress all of us in the same way. That's something that we're free from. So, but at the same time, this whole world, you can find people who would feel more comfortable dressing in a certain way. Women with maybe with skirts, and maybe if they're longer, there are people who prefer certain types of presenting themselves. Right? There's certain types of opinions that people have as to what is correct. But as a church, we don't actually teach one specific way of representing what is true, as, at least in terms of how we present ourselves, right? I believe that we need to find middle ground here. I don't think that we need to present a specific image, or let me tell you with all honesty. Your name is Carolina, right? Timothy, right? For example, today, at least here in Europe, what does it mean to go to church in a suit and tie?
Sí.
Here, at least, all of the politicians or business people, that's how they dress. So if you walk on the street, if you see someone walking on the street, walking dressed like this, the image that comes to mind isn't necessarily something that is very positive, on the way to church when you dress like this. So here's a time where you need to actually ask yourself. This is something that's key in doing mission and reaching others. You need to be in the right context. You need to put yourself in the mind of other people who are watching us, and really truly put ourselves into the minds of these people who are watching us. For example, another of the things that identify us, maybe of the women who go to church, our heels, our skirts, or the clothes we wear. But the truth is, what does it mean to the people who are around us? What do they associate these clothes, this presentation with? Do they associate it with a party, with work? We need to keep this in mind when people look at us, when we present ourselves to these people. And obviously, we're not going to go to the other extreme. I'm not going to go to church or present myself as a missionary with my pants with holes in them, or with things written on my shirt, because I need to keep in mind what the job I'm trying to do is. So I think here we need to find a middle ground and keep in mind what it is that we're trying to do, what our actual mission is, and not focus so much on the image that we're trying to present. I'm not saying that you need to go to one extreme of obviously going to church in your sports clothes, but as I said earlier, we need to find a middle ground.
Sí, aparece otra que dice,
Here's another question.
en tiempo de relativismo.
Here's
Inclusive
another question. We're in a time of relativism,
en donde
even when it
respetar
comes to
aceptar
biblical
la verdad
truths,
del otro
where
significa
respecting and even accepting other so called
a los
truths
estereotipos.
is becoming quite common. How can this be applied to stereotypes? Okay, actually, I'm a little confused because on the screen there's a different question, but let's actually answer the question you asked with relativism, right?
Ahí
Could you please repeat the question, actually?
en tiempo sí de relativismo.
All right, here we go.
Inclusive hablando de las
Let me
verdades
find the question.
en donde
Yeah, we're in a time of relativism, even when it comes to biblical truths,
¿cómo se puede
where
aplicar
respecting and accepting others' so called truths is becoming quite common. How can this be applied to our own stereotypes? Well, here we go. Okay. So, on one hand, I think it's extremely important to respect others. I think we can thank God even that we have the liberty, we have the ability to act and have our own beliefs. So if we are free to have our own beliefs, I think it's quite important, if God has given us this freedom, to respect the freedoms that someone else might have. So, and on the other hand, there's also something I would like to say here. I think we can see here the stereotype of fear. There's also the danger, if you go on the other side, to turn and become like actually the world. I think there's a big problem here of identity. I think, it's important, it's extremely important that we have clear in our minds what it is that we're trying to do, what the mission is in front of us, so that, what it is that we believe even, because after this we can come and defend our thoughts, our beliefs to other people, so that when these beliefs are challenged, we can respectfully defend them without actually, challenging other people and insulting their beliefs, but in challenging them and actually putting our beliefs in context and explaining why it is that we believe these beliefs that we hold dear to ourselves, and explaining why maybe they can reconsider theirs. And yes, you're right. So many times we rationalize the things we do, and we don't even think about what it is we're doing. So here we have another questions. So here, are stereotypes only limited to appearance? Well, no, obviously not. Stereotypes, actually, let me say something. I think stereotypes have three effects. They have a cognitive effect, an affective, in other words, how it affects us, an effect on how it affects us, as well as a behavioral effect. So, from these stereotypes, you can find that stereotypes can generate a certain feeling, a certain a certain type of reaction in us. Maybe it's positive, or maybe it generates fear in us. Maybe it's something that we don't know what's happening around us, and so it generates a certain kind of uncertainty in us. Here, let me give you a silly example. Someone here in the chat that's following along with us, maybe we can have someone who is a hater on the comments, who is starting to say silly things in the comments. So obviously, we, without knowing this person, we're going to have a certain stereotypes about that person. We don't actually know this person, but through his actions, through what little we know about him, we've already put certain thoughts about this person into our heads, and we have certain aspects of society that we use to describe this person. All right, let's move on. Okay, here, can we have stereotypes in ourselves and at the same time not judge? So what's the difference, in other words, between judging and stereotyping people? Okay, so what I think is judging is, I think, a consequence, a result of stereotypes, of having stereotypes, because I think that, for example, talking about what's cognitive, it could be about something that I'm living. There's certain beliefs that I have in myself that I have, and from these beliefs, I can actually, use my beliefs to judge someone through a cognitive distortion, that maybe what my belief is isn't the complete truth. Maybe it's something, that there's something in this person I don't actually know that's causing this behavior. And so judging might actually be the consequence of an incorrect stereotype or an incomplete stereotype that we have in ourselves. And so yes, maybe that's an effect that we can't distinguish between sometimes. Okay, here's another question. Did Jesus have certain stereotypes that we as Christians should imitate? I love this question, because actually if you look closely, the truth is, there are certain stereotypes that we have of Jesus. People saw him as a leader back then. And here, let me add this in parenthesis. Let's keep in mind how we have in ourselves. It's even happened with me that I've had these stereotypes where someone sees me as someone who is very happy, as someone who is transparent, someone who's authentic when I speak to them. But sometimes these stereotypes aren't necessarily what people have in mind when they think about someone who's the head of a department, someone who's in charge of of the things I am in charge of in my work here. But on top of this, if someone is spontaneous, is happy, that maybe given my position, people might look at me and say, hey, you need to be careful, because people can have certain types of thoughts about you and about the work that you're doing just because of those specific actions. I found myself in situations where I've felt these reactions from others, where people don't take me seriously because I don't actually fit into the stereotypes that they have. So what can I do? I think the key here is to be quite conscious. I think, sometimes I need to adapt myself into the stereotypes others have and be more serious. But it's more important to be intentional and clear on what it is that I'm trying to do from my perspective, from what I'm trying to accomplish, and in this way break the stereotypes that someone else might have by actually proving myself to be something that they didn't think. But am I actually looking to break these stereotypes just for the sake of breaking their stereotypes and to prove them wrong? I think, no, this is something that's quite dangerous. In my case, personally, thanks to my husband, maybe in part thanks to my husband, I've fallen in love with the book Desire of Ages and the Christ presented in that book. And this helps me when I think about people who aren't taking me seriously, because sometimes it's quite hard. But I always go back to this book and always think, Jesus didn't actually fit into the stereotype of the Messiah that people had back in those times. So many people rejected him because he didn't fit into the narrative in their minds. And how many people lost a chance at being saved, possibly, because they rejected him because of these stereotypes that they have. So I constantly ask God, please give me a simple faith. Make me a person who, is honest, a person who is straightforward in what I'm trying to accomplish and what I'm trying to present. And, not so much think about the clothes I'm wearing, the tie, the suit, or the formal dress, but instead move forward and try to help. To draw closer to other people, to draw other people closer to God, and obviously use my mind, use my brain to keep in mind how it is that I'm acting and how it is that I'm presenting myself to all the people who come in contact with me. In my endeavors to show others about who Jesus is, and yes, sometimes we might feel insecure and uncomfortable because we see that people are judging us and putting us in certain boxes due to certain types. We might see someone who's a Mormon or a priest dressed as they do dress. And, sometimes we see these people who we like to reach out to, and they see us, and, there's nothing that you can do. You're already put inside a box. So obviously there's things that we need to do to try and reach these people, to overcome these stereotypes and present ourselves as different. But at the same time, we shouldn't get distracted from the message that we're trying to present, which is this Jesus, who he was able to overcome stereotypes in certain people and reach these people truly. But in other people, obviously, he wasn't able to do that. And that isn't always our responsibility. So, yes, you're absolutely right. We have the perfect example in Jesus who shows us how much we need to take care of how we present ourselves. So here we have another question. So how can we be diverse with different stereotypes and even so reflect the image of Jesus? In other words, how can we be different, not be a homogeneous group, and still reflect Jesus? So yeah, here we go. We should actually be proud of the differences that we have. God didn't create us all equal. As an Adventist people, as a remnant people, not necessarily even Adventists, just as Christians, we don't actually have specific clothes that represent us, or we don't have specific music that represent us throughout history. So in this sense, we can have peace in our hearts because you know we can find middle ground here because we don't need to worry so much about how it is that we present ourselves with the color of our clothes or the ironedness of our shirt or the tie that we're wearing if it matches, but on the other hand we don't have to actually go to the other extreme of you know trying to look like everyone else in the world and trying to fit into what the narrative is or what the trends are today in fashion or the current the current thing that's hip. So I think that's not what people are actually looking for when in terms of mission. I think what people are looking for is just a representation, a simple representation of Christ, and to be treated in a way that actually represents how Christ would treat them. And I think sometimes we get distracted, what image that we're presenting. And I think if we fight against these needs that sometimes we feel to, feel inside a certain group, to feel as part of, a certain cliche or a certain clique of people that, these are the saved people or these are the people who, who represent who I am. I don't think we're trying to convince anybody. At least I don't think we need to convince ourselves of this. I think this is a thing between us and God. What is it that I'm trying to accomplish here? I think part of this is to mature ourselves, to grow in Christ. And I think, sometimes putting ourselves and calibrating our perspective with that of Christ, I think that can be a huge help. Sometimes, we see people and we're like, oh, I want to be like them. I want to have that, I want to look like that person, how he works out or how he, a social media person who is famous or something like this. Okay, so now we have the last question. So how can we overcome, this is the question we have on screen, how can we overcome stereotypes without losing the essence of Christianity and at the same time being careful of, being wary of the secularism that is so predominant in this world? I think this is something that so many of us subconsciously or even consciously have in our minds. This is something that we need to be careful about, and we need to just look at Christ, not distract ourselves looking amongst ourselves to see who is better than us, who among us is most Christ-like. I don't think that's something that we need to be looking at. I think as an institution, as a group of people, we need to be looking at Christ. And we don't need to be looking at, this preacher or that person, that leader. I don't think we need to be looking to be more like that person, but instead we need to focus on Christ. He is the person we need to imitate. He is the person, the stereotype that we need to try and imitate. I don't think we need to be thinking too much about our clothes, of how much makeup I have put on today. Is my hair on point? We go to church and we look around us and you see someone, and it's so easy, to say, oh, look at him in the church in La Universidad Adventista del Plato, in Sagunto. We can say that, oh, that person, I think he has this certain belief or he is this type of person just because of the clothes he wears. But I've had so many times that I've come across people who I've had certain thoughts about to begin with, but they've actually, broken these stereotypes that I had about them. And obviously no one better than Christ to actually break these stereotypes, because obviously there was a whole process that people went through when they came in contact with him. So we need to keep in mind, we need to be, we need to keep in mind that this is normal for us humans to have stereotypes, to have certain, our brains want to simplify things, and so we do create stereotypes. Like I said earlier, it's impossible to break these stereotypes. But yes, let's keep in mind, we need to not lose hope. Stereotypes are always going to exist, but we need to calibrate them with the true image and the true person that we need to have the perspective of, which is Christ. of this representation, perfect representation of Christ. Thank you so much, Maijo, for being with us and sharing this so important, this message with us. And so to all of our viewers, thank you so much for joining us today as well. It has been a pleasure and a privilege to be with you today. Let us see you soon. Thank you so much. We've already mentioned so many times before that this School of Mission is multicultural. So we would like to share with you some people who are from various parts of the world who are wearing their clothes, typical clothes.
de Argentina. También en esta foto tenemos a Vinod de Nepal. También tenemos a Andrea de México. Y en esta foto tenemos a Birner de Venezuela. También acá tenemos con sus atuendos a Jamín Salamanca de Chile. Y en esta foto tenemos a Fabiola de República Dominicana. Y aquí tenemos a Angeli Baez de también República Dominicana. Y acá tenemos a Giselle Montalvo de México. Muy bien, y ahora sí, llegó la hora de ir cerrando con nuestra clase.
Okay, now it is time to start closing our class, our 5th class in this installment, the series of I Will Go, School of Mission. Next week, we will have with us Petras Bahadur, who is going to talk to us about something that I didn't hear. So next week, you will be able to hear from him. But please remember, today our exam, our quiz for today is already open. So before we go, we leave you with this song, I Will Go. I invite you to join us as we sing.
Tu mensaje anuncia que eres el Salvador. In un mondo pieno di tanti cuori, cercando conforto e sostegno. نريد أن نتبع مثلك نشارك الرحمة والسلام. Take the word for